If you're in it for the long haul, you're going to face changes. You're going to have to make decisions. You're going to have to bend to trends. You're going to have to decide when it's time to get out of one niche over into another and how to protect your assets. And that's what I want to talk about today. I'm Brian. I'm at the lake. Let's take a look at the different phases of reselling. I just finished wrapping up and editing a video about comparing 3 auctions, and I named them Manny, Mo, and Jack after the Pep Boys. And while I was editing, I decided to use that backstory to put a little different spin on things and to talk about long-term selling. You've decided to be a reseller. Maybe you're just starting. Maybe you're in that growth phase. Maybe you've plateaued and you're thinking, it's time to retire and move to the lake. Well, whichever aspect you're into, whatever niche you're selling, whatever you're considering, I want to take a little closer look about the Pep Boys as a business and about the reselling business in general. Because for about 100 years, the Pep Boys were sellers. They were resellers in the automotive business. Eventually, they expanded into the tire business. Because as with many companies, small businesses, if you're in it for the long haul, you're going to face changes. You're going to have to make decisions. You're going to have to bend to trends. You're going to have to decide when it's time to get out of one niche over into another and how to protect your assets. And that's what I want to talk about today. I'm Brian. I'm at the lake. Let's take a look at the different phases of reselling. So the Pep Boys started out as 4 guys. You only ever hear of Manny, Mo, and Jack. Well, there was a 4th person, another partner. I believe he was also a Mo. But after a few years, he decided to cash out of the business. I'm not sure why. I've never heard that story. But when I lived in Southern California, Manny, Mo, and Jack were on the billboards at many of the auto parts store. As a young budding shade tree mechanic in the muscle car era, Manny, Mo, and Jack played a role in my life. And I didn't think of much as resellers then because I was in the Navy. I wasn't reselling. But if we take a look at that, I'm going to divide the growth and decline of a business into about 4 phases. We'll call them A, B, C, and D for want of anything. And you may be in any one of them. I'm now in the last one, having worked my way through the previous 3, and that's what I want to talk about. So about 1921, these 4 guys each put some money in the kitty and they opened an automotive parts store. Now we're talking about the era where cars were new and they used oil wicks in their headlights, which according to urban legend is how they became the Pep Boys. It wasn't the original name of the company, but a local constable would stop drivers whose lights were out and say, hey, go get a new wick from the boys at Pep. So they changed their name to the Pep Boys. And that was about the time the 4th one cashed out. So there have only always been 3 caricatures on their ads. But Manny, Mo, and Jack. They ran their business through the Depression, through the war years. And as with all companies, at the beginning they had to decide what they were going to sell, what platform they were going to sell it on, and what they were going to do as far as expanding their business. That was that early phase. They had to get some experience, they had to set up the business, they had to make early decisions. All of us have to go through that. Whether you become a small business or an LLC, or you're a seller, a casual seller, whether you use a platform like eBay or Etsy or sell locally or use Facebook, you've got to make those early decisions. Where are you going to spend your time? What product are you going to use? What are you going to source to make your money to pay your time? Okay, that's phase A. Well, if you're lucky, you're going to move on to phase B. That's that growth phase. You look back and you evaluate your wins and your losses from phase A. How did you How did you do? Did you make enough wins to cover your time, make a profit, start thinking about expanding? Have you got some stories you want to tell about what went really wrong in phase A and how you almost quit, or you did quit and then you started over again, or you changed your niche? I'd be curious to hear those if you want to send me some comments. And that's pretty much the way Rose and I started. We started phase A because I saw a business opportunity. I was retired. I was starting to go to auctions because Rose and I had plans to build a house on some property we owned, and I needed to replace my tools. And along the way, I saw that the local auction house was a great source for getting not only tools, but materials. They also provided me with some early vehicles because our vehicles hadn't arrived yet. So they provided temporary vehicles. And in short order, they also provided me a part-time job and an opportunity to learn the view from the inside of an auction house. I'd always been on the outside looking in, but that started a part-time job in the auction business. And I learned a lot in those years. And I used that information to expand our business, separate from the auction, but related. They were one source. They were also a source for marketing and selling. When I had weeks that I had too much, they could help me liquidate, sell off, and turn a regular profit. It became a regular gig. They ran a once-a-month sale at the auction location, and every month I began bringing lots. As the months went by, I brought more lots. Pretty soon I'm bringing truck and trailer loads of lots, in addition to what I was selling out of my own house and what I was using to work on our property. I also opened a niche buying from my neighbors who had 9-to-5 jobs. So they knew I was going to the auction. They'd give me a shopping list. I need one of these. I need one of these. Okay. So that expanded the business. That was phase B. We were ramping up. We were making contacts. We were buying things like trailers. We were looking at storage. We were looking at platforms. In those days, I didn't use eBay much. We were using local sales, consignment stores, but we were making decisions about how to grow our business. Because for one thing, I found out I liked it, which helps when you're running a business. All right. So eventually, like Manny, Mo, and Jack, we're building. They went public. They started selling shares in the company. They were publicly traded. That brought a lot of changes. Okay. New management, new rules. They began acquiring other businesses. They began splitting services away from parts. I think at their peak they reached 1,200 stores nationwide. They were actually buying companies like a tire company so they could move into new niches. And in phase C, you'll see a lot of that yourself. You may already be there. You don't sell one thing any longer. You want to make more money. You want to start putting away for your retirement. Maybe you're getting a little bored with your original niches because not much changes. You buy it, you sell it, there's nothing exciting there for you. So you start looking around. Some niches might be complementary. There might be something adjacent to what you started selling that you can sell. Or you may become opportunistic. You simply have a set of values, you have a set of criteria, and you look at each new opportunity and you hold it against your criteria. And that's much of what I went into on the video, the long video I just finished, in which I compared 3 different auctions and I called them Manny, Mo, and Jack. Buying in those arenas would all be different. You'd do it for different reasons. You'd source different items. The sellers were putting on those auctions for different reasons. So as you work your way from phase B to phase C, you might need to acquire things, bigger buildings. You might have to lease some space, get some forklifts, hire some labor, maybe get an accountant. You need a guy to help you with the more complicated taxes. So you're growing. You're growing. You're paying yourself a salary now. You may be paying others salaries, which means you're responsible for them. And one of the interesting things about being responsible for employees is teaching them. Over the years, in different arenas, I've had to teach people who didn't know their jobs or didn't know their jobs fully to develop them. Now, in the reseller business, one of the interesting things is that you take somebody in at the deck plates, you teach them the business, they really seem to be sharp at it. Well, those who seem to be the sharpest often say, well, thank you very much, but I've learned enough now that I'm going to go sell for myself. You've been a fair boss, you've paid me a good wage, I learned a lot, now I want to go apply it. And you have to decide whether to start with a new apprentice and do it again. Because if you run for decades, you will see some of that. Now, over the years, I talk about the Pep Boys, and they sold off some companies, they split some companies. We've had years like that, where we went into business with a guy with a storefront, and we were picking up about 25% of the tab. It was a different experience than selling for ourselves and only working with ourselves. But it only lasted for as long as it lasted. We've also had experiences where we rented lease space and we were at the mercy and the whim of the landlord, or the person we paid was at the mercy of their landlord. And that's another thing. As time goes on, your business models will develop. Some items will fall by the wayside. You may expand. You may change your focus. You may go from selling 3 or 4 niches to selling anything that you can figure you can make a profit on. But outside pressures will make changes too. The general cost of living and inflation. What you could afford to do last year, you may not be able to afford to do this year. In the years where things like gas prices are soaring, you will have to evaluate, can I continue to put fuel in a truck that gets 13 miles to the gallon to pull a trailer? Or if I'm only getting those kind of loads selectively, should I simply rent a truck when I need it? Okay, we'll talk about that in a video I have planned for vehicles. Okay, the platforms you choose to sell on, whether it be local Facebook pickup, whether it be eBay, whether it be Amazon or Walmart, the question is, are they making changes you can live with? eBay's been on the hook for a couple of years now about the increased amount they're charging their sellers through programs like promoted listing. They seem to be trying to squeeze an awful lot of money out of the same number of sellers. It means the sellers aren't making the profit margins they used to. You get a platform like Amazon. For a little while, I had an account to sell on Amazon. But I ran straight into that time period where they began gating and requiring receipts for the items I wanted to sell. Blu-rays, DVDs, and anime come to mind. I was getting them sealed out of storage units. I couldn't produce retail receipts. I had a receipt that said I bought a storage unit. Amazon wouldn't accept those for me to lift the gates. So I stopped looking at Amazon as a viable platform for my business model. So my point is, no matter which platform you use, over time it will change. The same is true with auction houses. I go into an auction house, especially if they've just opened, and I offer them product. I can bring you a truckload or a trailer load or 2 trailer loads a month. Every month, month in, month out, here's what I've got to offer you. And if they're just starting up, they say, great, fine, please. And that relationship runs until it doesn't. Because eventually, if they're doing things right, they will outgrow you. They will outgrow your small business, right? That happened to me this year, maybe the end of last year, with a company I'd used for many years. They simply started selling things like backhoes and excavators and Connex boxes. So they were no longer looking for things like table saws and drill presses. They outgrew me. So in that time frame, Rose and I looked around and we said, well, what are our opportunities for selling platforms? We're not sure about eBay as a long-term solution. We've been using it for 20 years, but I don't like the way it's trending. What should our backup be? So we did the processes to register our business to become an auction itself. So now anytime I want to, I can run an auction. It's a great opportunity. Say I've got something like 300-400 comic books that I've collected over the last couple of years, one lot or one group at a time. I can go up, take them into the building behind me, lay them out, turn them into lots, figure out which singles have value, and I can snap pictures and make listings, and I can run my own auction. I can say pick it up locally, or I can say I'll ship it anywhere in the country. So I have alternatives. And as you do this long enough, you're going to look for alternatives that are viable. They won't all be equal. They won't always solve your problem. You may need several of them. And over the years, we've used, like I say, consignment stores. We've done swap meets. We've run our own auctions. We've used other auction houses. We've used platforms like eBay, Etsy, and like I say, briefly, Amazon. New platforms come along. We check them out. We say, is this viable for us? Does this platform's terms, fees, do they match with our business model? If you're out there buying things like table saws and drill presses, it's going to be awful hard to sell them on a platform like eBay or Etsy. You may have to restrict those sales to local sales or Facebook. Same way with fees. If you notice that fees are going up and your profit margins are going down, that may no longer be a viable platform. In the years I worked with a consignment store to keep all of its shelves filled, eventually she was faced with increased rents of her own. Her landlord wanted to raise the rents, doubled them in fact. So she was forced with a decision of whether to raise rents for all of her consigners. I had a little different arrangement than the average consigner, but it meant the average consigner started closing up their little shops and their little kiosks and getting out of the business because their profit margins were squeezed too low. Well, eventually she was faced with closing the doors. I helped her auction off the entire contents of the store. Okay, so platforms change, opportunities change, niches change. I've always been an opportunistic seller. I started by replacing my tools. It put me in the auction arena. I started seeing opportunity. I expanded that. We not only began using other platforms to buy, but we began using other platforms to sell. At one point, my fleet of trailers alone was 2 flatbeds, 4 enclosed, and I had a lumber drop truck, right? So we operated a large fleet because we were selling and buying big items like banded bundles of lumber. Okay, time passed. Rose and I got older. We decided it was time to enter phase 4, the downsizing or right sizing, the retirement, the moving to the lake. We were financially stable enough to say we could cut back. We could enjoy the grandchildren who moved to the area. We could move to a smaller property with fewer chores to maintain. We could actually spend more of each day. Rose retired, so we could spend time together. Many of the years I worked as a reseller, Rose stayed working a part-time job in town. That provided us some security. It gave her a social outlet, but it meant that all of a sudden our lives changed again, and we were together almost every day, all day long. Causes a change in dynamics between even a married couple of 50 years. Rose and I have been together 50 years now. So it means that constant change is a constant situation to deal with. Pep Boys, eventually their management got into some trouble. If you look back at the history of the company, they say management decisions may have caused a decline in the size of the company and the number of stores. They began selling off some of their assets. It's what Rose and I did. When we decided to leave Seebeck and move to the lake, we started first by selling things like the sawmill, the forklift, the lumber drop truck, the biggest assets we operated. And then we worked our way down. We kept parts of what we needed. We still kept 2 enclosed trailers. We needed it for the move. We kept 1 flatbed. Well, since then, we've right-sized even more, and I'm down to 1 flatbed and 1 enclosed trailer. Half the time, the enclosed trailer is at Brandy's because she's using it to go get hay. I can go months and months these days without needing a trailer to do an auction pickup. And it's why if you look back at that longer video where I compare Manny, Mo, and Jack, the auctions, you will see that I talk about how certain patterns of buying will require certain decisions and equipment. It'll change your tow vehicle requirements. It'll change your sourcing vehicle requirements. It'll change the amount of square footage you need to store stock. It may cause you to lease off-site space. We did that for many years. So all of that is all well and good, but you should look at where you are on that graph, which phase you're in, and give serious thought to where you're going, how far you've come, look back at what you've achieved, make some more decisions about your future. Is it a year for expanding? Is it a year for maintaining? Is it a year to put away money for retirement for when you get to phase D? Because many people look forward to phase D, the idea that they can cut back, roll back, and chill. Don't I look chill? I'm chill. So at this point in the game, Rose and I make conscious decisions about, we look at an auction, we assess it, and we say, well, if we commit to that auction, we're committing X number of hours and days to processing that. So we evaluate not our need for money so much as our need to make the money that way. Because you can make money handling easy product, you can make money handling hard product. Now, I've only ever found 1 Rolex watch in a storage unit, but it gives some thought to the idea that it takes just about as much time to photograph and list a Timex as it does a Rolex. Now, if I had a lot of Rolexes, I wouldn't have to make many sales a year. And I've got a relative through marriage who sells high-end coins and high-end watches. He was into it with his dad. And his entire inventory could probably fit in a suitcase. But he probably nets as much as I do a year selling used product and replacement parts out of my buildings. His products probably get assessed harder, and his buyers are more critical than mine, but his potential profit margins are huge compared to mine. He doesn't have to make nearly as many successful sales a year to make the same kind of money. And as you're deciding in phase A and phase B what it is you're going to sell, give that all some consideration. What do you like to do? It doesn't do you any good to pick niches you dislike. Rose and I don't sell a lot of clothing. We have from time to time. We have in those time periods when we were, say, clearing storage units, because storage units were full of clothing. But given a choice of buying product A or product B or product C, we will not typically pick clothing. There are just certain categories that when you commit to it, they require a certain amount of effort. And it differs if you pick a different category. Was the difference between buying those big lots in Mo with the air compressors and the drill presses than if I buy lots in Manny and their new boxed Mary Kay cosmetics? Same profit margin potential in those lots, very different physical effort, very different process of storing, listing, and selling. If I sell that big air compressor, it's one listing, Facebook Marketplace, or it stays in the trailer and it goes to auction. If you look at the Mary Kay lot, I'll have to put a picture up here, but there must be a dozen or more items. If they're individual part numbers, individual models, flavors, colors, then each one would have to have a different listing. So I haven't looked yet because they're still sitting on my table saw, but if they were all uniquely different, they would require 12 times as much effort to list than a Facebook Marketplace ad for that air compressor. It's beginning to get dark. It must be about 6. I've got to go do some packing. This is Brian. I'm at the lake. I'm always glad to talk reselling. Send me a question, send me a comment, give me a like, give me a subscribe if you got something out of this, and watch for our next video. Or go to our playlist. We've got 50 videos up now, and we're going to keep going. All right, you enjoy your night, and go out and sell something.